A sharp blade is feared, not because it cuts, but because it reminds the dull knives of their own uselessness. Welcome, chosen one. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to disrupt, to unsettle, to remind people of everything they lack. Your mind is a weapon, and the world despises what it cannot control. The average person isn't just comfortable with mediocrity. They defend it like a religion. The weak fear what outshines them, and your refusal to dim your light is their biggest nightmare. You don't have to attack them. Your existence alone is an act of war. They want you to water yourself down, to reduce your brilliance to something digestible for the simple-minded. But why should a lion pretend to be a house cat just because the mice feel threatened? Before we go deeper, hit like and subscribe. Every time you engage, you push this message further into the algorithm, signaling to YouTube that more chosen ones need to wake up. The more of us who see this, the stronger we become. Now, let's talk about the power they fear, the power you carry. You are a walking reminder of everything they'll never be. Your intelligence, your depth, your refusal to participate in meaningless chatter. It haunts them. It exposes their emptiness. They say you're arrogant, cold, too much. But what they really mean is that you don't need their validation, and that makes you dangerous. The truth is, the world is getting dumber. Studies prove it. The reverse Flynn effect shows IQ levels are dropping. Society isn't just dumbing down, it's celebrating it. The less you think, the more you belong. And that's exactly why they despise you. You don't just refuse to join the herd. You make them realize they're cattle. When you enter a room, the energy shifts. They can't explain it, but they feel it. Your presence alone forces people to confront their own lack of depth. It's why they try to isolate you, tear you down, and make you question yourself. They don't want you to see your power. They want you to believe that being different is a curse, not the gift that it is. You've probably felt it. Conversations that drain you, interactions that leave you hollow, social circles where no one is saying anything of real substance. You're not crazy for wanting more. They've been conditioned to settle for less. You speak in full thoughts. They reply in recycled phrases. You question reality. They defend their illusions. You move with purpose. They drift with the tide. And because of that, you terrify them. They want compliance, not intellect. They want comfort, not truth. But you were built differently. The universe chose you to break the cycle, not become part of it. And that's why your very existence pisses them off. So let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them call you too much while they remain not enough. A wolf never loses sleep over the opinions of sheep. Your path is clear. Never shrink yourself for those who refuse to grow. And thank you, yes, you, the chosen one. Your presence here is no coincidence. Whether this is your first time or you've been walking this path with us for a while, know this: you are part of something unstoppable. If you're ready to own your truth, embrace your power, and watch them choke on the reality of who you've always been, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments to mark this moment. And now, let's get into it, step by step. Because believe me, if you are a true chosen one, you will feel the pull to stay till the very end. Let's begin. Number 1. They weren't ready for the truth, so they called it arrogance. A mind that sees through the illusion is a threat to those still trapped in it. The truth is, they never hated your intelligence. They hated what it revealed about them. They hated the mirror you unknowingly held up to their faces, the reflection of their own limitations, their intellectual laziness. their dependence on pre-packaged opinions. You never had to call them weak. They felt it the moment you spoke. And that's why they resent you. Most people don't seek intelligence, they seek comfort. They want predictable conversations, recycled opinions, and easy validation. They want to stay where they are, wrapped in the illusion that they know enough, that they've figured it all out. The moment you challenge that illusion, you become the enemy. Not because you're wrong, but because you force them to think. And thinking requires effort, an effort most people aren't willing to make. You see, when you refuse to dumb yourself down, you're not just being different, you're breaking a sacred rule. The rule that says, "Don't make me feel stupid." The rule that says, "Pretend along with us." The rule that says, "Be smaller so we can feel bigger." They want your intelligence as long as it entertains them, but the moment it forces them to confront their own inadequacy, they flip the script. They call you arrogant, cold, difficult, not because you are, but because it's easier to label you than it is to level up. But here's the real reason they fear you. You are proof that they could be more, and that fact eats them alive. Because if you exist, if someone like you can think, evolve, and refuse to settle, then what's their excuse? If intelligence, awareness, and depth are possible, then their lack of it is a choice. And that realization, that terrifies them. It forces them to acknowledge the corners of their mind they've neglected, the truths they've ignored, and the ways they've let themselves decay. So instead of facing that reality, they take the easy way out. They turn you into the villain. You've seen it before. The subtle shifts in tone when you speak, the fake laughs, the passive-aggressive comments, the sudden shift in energy when your presence disrupts the status quo. At first, they tolerate you, maybe even admire you. But as soon as they realize you won't lower yourself to their level, admiration turns to hostility. Because you're no longer just someone with a sharp mind, you're a threat to their delusion. And that's when they start playing dirty. They isolate you, mock you, label you too much. Not because they want you gone, but because they need to believe that your depth is a flaw. That way, they don't have to face the uncomfortable truth. They were capable of more, but they chose less. But here's where they miscalculated. The universe never aligns itself with mediocrity. It aligns with those who seek truth, who refuse to shrink, who demand more from themselves and the world around them. And that's why, no matter how much they try to bury you, the universe keeps pulling you forward. They thought they could erase you, but all they did was highlight you. You're not here to be understood by them. You're here to outgrow them, to force them to watch as you rise while they remain shackled to their self-imposed limitations. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to disrupt. And the very thing they despise about you, that's exactly what makes you unstoppable. So let them call you arrogant. Let them misunderstand you. Let them mock what they cannot comprehend. Because the truth is, the more they resist you, the stronger you become. And by the time they realize their mistake, it'll be too late. You'll be too far ahead for them to catch up. Number 2, they call it socializing. You call it a waste of breath. The emptier the mind, the louder the mouth. They say you're antisocial. They say you're awkward, distant, uninterested. But what they really mean is, you refuse to participate in their meaningless rituals. Most people don't talk to connect. They talk to belong. Words aren't used to exchange ideas. They're used to keep up an illusion, a script, a performance where everyone plays their part, nods on cue, laughs at the right moments, and pretends that conversations built on cliches and empty phrases actually mean something. How are you? They don't want an answer. Crazy weather, huh? They don't care. Did you see the game last night? They don't even remember half of it. None of it is real. It's verbal filler, a desperate attempt to avoid silence, because silence forces people to think, and most people don't want that responsibility. But then you walk in, and you don't play along. You don't nod mindlessly. You don't pretend to be entertained by recycled jokes. You don't waste your breath on shallow observations that lead nowhere. And that's when the shift happens. They notice you, and they don't like what they see. Because your presence is a reminder that most conversations are meaningless, that they're just talking to hear themselves talk, that they have nothing of substance to say, but they say it anyway because silence terrifies them. And instead of questioning themselves, they blame you. They say you're the problem, that you don't get socializing, that you're too serious, too intense, too different. But what they really mean is, you don't need the illusion to feel comfortable. Because let's be honest, when was the last time someone actually said something worth listening to? Most conversations are verbal junk food, empty calories, no nutrition, a sugar rush of social validation, quickly followed by the crash of realizing nothing important was said. And yet, they expect you to indulge in it, to fake a smile, to pretend you care, to force yourself into a mold that was never meant for you. But why should you? Why should you lower your frequency just to match their static? Why should you waste energy on words that carry no weight? Why should you dim your depth just because they're afraid of drowning? The truth is, your silence isn't rudeness, it's rebellion. It's a refusal to be pulled into their empty rituals. It's a declaration that your energy is too valuable to be spent on conversations that go nowhere. And that terrifies them. Because when you don't play along, you break the illusion. You remind them that their words mean nothing, that their conversations are just a distraction from the emptiness they refuse to face. And deep down, they know you're right. But instead of rising to meet you, they take the easy way out. They resent you. They'll say you're arrogant, that you think you're better than them, that you're too quiet, because they need a reason, any reason, to explain why your presence makes them uncomfortable. And blaming you is easier than admitting the truth. They are afraid of depth, afraid of real conversations, afraid of facing themselves. And you make them see that. That's why they'll never understand you. That's why they'll never accept you. Because you don't talk just to talk. You don't seek validation through meaningless chatter. You don't waste words, and that makes them nervous. Because they know everything they say around you will be weighed, measured, and found lacking. So let them talk. Let them fill the silence with empty words. Let them convince themselves that they're the normal ones and you're the strange one. It doesn't matter, because the truth is, when you finally do speak, they all shut up. Number 3, they hate you, not because you're wrong, but because you're right. A weak mind is only at peace when surrounded by weaker minds. You never had to say a word. You never had to claim superiority. You never had to rub your intelligence in anyone's face. Yet, somehow, your existence alone is enough to set them off. Because deep down, they know. They know they've been coasting through life on mental autopilot. They know their opinions aren't really their own, just borrowed ideas, regurgitated from headlines, influencers, and whatever the loudest voice in the room says. They know they haven't questioned anything deeply in years, maybe ever. And then you show up. You don't just accept things at face value. You don't mindlessly repeat what you're told. You ask questions that demand real answers. You see through their contradictions, their lazy arguments, their half-baked philosophies. And the worst part, you don't even have to try. Your presence alone forces them to recognize something they've been running from. They could be sharper, wiser, more self-aware, but they've chosen not to be. And that reality, that stings. So instead of rising to meet the challenge, instead of sharpening their own minds, they take the easier route, resenting you. They label you as too much. They call you difficult. They act as if your curiosity is offensive, as if your critical thinking is an attack. Not because you're actually attacking them, but because in a way, you are. You're disrupting the fragile comfort they've built around themselves. Because here's the truth. Most people aren't looking for knowledge. They're looking for validation. They don't want to be challenged. They don't want to be forced to think harder. They want confirmation that they're already right, that they already know enough, that their worldview is solid and unshakable. And then you come along asking why, instead of just nodding. You come along questioning what they've blindly accepted. You come along making them aware of just how lazy their thinking has been. And it infuriates them, because in that moment they're forced to realize that intelligence is a choice, growth is a choice, depth is a choice, and if you exist, if someone like you can think, analyze, evolve, then what's their excuse? They don't have one. And that's why they'd rather drag you down than rise to your level. It's easier to attack you than to confront themselves. It's easier to resent you than to admit they've been lazy. It's easier to call you arrogant than to acknowledge their own ignorance. And they will fight to keep that illusion intact. You've seen it before. The way people get defensive when you challenge their beliefs. The way they mock what they don't understand. The way they pretend you're the problem because the alternative, that they've been wrong this whole time, is too much for them to handle. But here's what they don't realize. The universe does not reward mental laziness. You weren't built to blend in with them. You weren't built to shrink yourself for their comfort. You were built to see through the noise, to question, to evolve. And the very fact that they fear you proves how powerful that is. So let them talk. Let them dismiss you. Let them pretend you're the issue. Because while they stay stuck in the same tired loops, recycling the same thoughts, defending the same hollow opinions, you keep growing. And by the time they finally realize their mistake, it won't matter. You'll be too far ahead for them to catch up. Number 4. They don't despise you. They despise what you make them see. A dull blade blames the sharp one for its own inability to cut. They don't actually hate you. They hate the way your presence makes them feel. You walk into a room and suddenly they're aware of their shortcomings, their untapped potential, their wasted time. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to criticize. Just being you is enough to activate something they've spent their whole lives suppressing. The realization that they could have been more. But instead of facing that truth, they do what weak minds always do. They reject the mirror. They twist reality to make themselves the victim and you the villain. They label you arrogant, difficult, out of touch. Not because it's true, but because it's the easiest way to deal with the discomfort you bring. Accepting that you earned your intelligence, your insight, your depth. That would mean accepting that they chose to remain stagnant. And that's a truth they'll do anything to avoid. You see, most people live their lives avoiding self-awareness. They don't want to reflect, analyze, or question themselves. They don't want to confront the fact that they've been playing small, following the herd, choosing convenience over growth. And when you come along, unapologetic, sharp, unwilling to shrink, they're forced to acknowledge a reality they despise. They had the same 24 hours as you, the same access to books, to knowledge, to self-improvement, the same potential to be more, and they wasted it. So what do? They attack, they gossip, they downplay your intelligence, call you nerdy, weird, too intense. They mock what they don't understand because ridicule is easier than reflection. It's a defense mechanism, not a rational decision, not a conscious plan, just pure gut-level survival. They feel like prey in the presence of a predator, not because you're hunting them, but because your existence reminds them of their own weakness. And weak people will do anything to protect their delusions. But here's the truth, chosen one, they don't matter. You are not here to be understood by those who refuse to understand themselves. You are not here to dim your light so they can feel comfortable in the dark. The universe didn't align itself in your favor just so you could waste time convincing small minds to think bigger. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call you whatever helps them sleep at night. Because at the end of the day, their words won't change reality. They can tell themselves you're too much, but that won't make them more. They can mock your depth, but that won't fill their emptiness. They can reject the mirror, but they'll always know, deep down, that you were never the problem. The only difference between you and them is that you had the courage to face yourself, to see your flaws, your weaknesses, your blind spots, and do something about them, while they chose to look away. That's why your presence makes them uneasy. That's why they push you away. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you did something they refused to do. You chose growth over comfort. You chose truth over delusion. You chose power over fear. And that will always make the weak uncomfortable. So let them talk. Let them project. Let them twist reality to protect themselves. It changes nothing. Because at the end of the day, you don't need their approval. They need your absence. Number 5. They can't keep up, so they call it arrogance. A dull mind sees a sharpened blade as a threat, not a tool. You walk into a room, speak with clarity, and immediately feel the shift, the subtle tension, the discomfort in their eyes. Not because you were rude, not because you said anything offensive, but because you said something too well, too structured, too logical. And that's unacceptable. Because in a world built on vagueness, where people prioritize feelings over facts, precision is treated like an attack. When you cut through the nonsense and speak directly, they don't hear your words. They hear a challenge. They hear, "I'm smarter than you." They hear, "You're wrong, and I can prove it." Even when that's not what you said. Because truth be told, they don't actually hate your intelligence. They hate what it reveals about them. Most people are comfortable in intellectual mediocrity. They thrive in half-baked opinions, in weak arguments propped up by emotion, in conversations that go nowhere because no one wants to be pinned down to an actual position. And then you come along, concise, factual, unwavering, and suddenly they feel exposed. Your precision forces them to confront the weakness of their own thinking, and instead of rising to meet you, they do what weak minds always do. They label you. You're arrogant. You think you know everything. You always have to be right. Not because these things are true, but because calling you arrogant is easier than admitting they lack the discipline to think as sharply as you do. Ironically, real arrogance isn't precision. Real arrogance is refusing to learn. Yet the very people who accuse you of being full of yourself are the ones who shut down the moment they're challenged. They're the ones who reject facts they don't like, who refuse to refine their ideas, who would rather attack the messenger than engage with the message. They mistake certainty for superiority. They confuse logic with condescension, because they've been conditioned to believe that confidence is offensive, that clear thinking is somehow aggressive. And so, every conversation with them feels like running in circles. You speak logically, they respond emotionally. You try to exchange ideas, they try to win. You want a discussion, they want a debate. But what they don't realize is, you're not fighting them, you're fighting their insecurities. And that's a battle they've already lost. This is why most debates go nowhere. You're holding up a mirror, and instead of facing their own reflection, they lash out at you. Your clarity reminds them that they've been lazy with their thinking, that they rely on filler words and vague ideas to protect themselves from ever having to be wrong. They expect you to soften your words, to wrap your intelligence in fluff, to dilute your mind so they can feel comfortable, and when you don't, you become the villain. But here's what they'll never admit. They envy you. Deep down, they wish they could speak with the same conviction. They wish they could back up their arguments with more than just emotions. They wish they had the ability to cut through the noise the way you do. And that's why they resent you. Because every time you open your mouth, you remind them of what they could be, but aren't willing to become. Let them misinterpret you. Let them twist your words. Let them call you arrogant, condescending, or too intense. Because at the end of the day, their opinion doesn't make you wrong. It only proves that they weren't ready for the truth. Number 6. They bond over weakness. You refuse to play the victim. They wanted a fellow prisoner, not someone who could walk out of the cage. Most people don't connect through strength. They connect through flaws, failures, and shared limitations. They bond over complaining about their jobs, their relationships, their problems. They form alliances based on mutual misery, not mutual growth. Because in a world that rewards mediocrity, struggle isn't just expected, it's celebrated. And then there's you. You don't play the victim. You don't bond over excuses. You don't trade weaknesses as currency in social interactions. You don't indulge in self-pity just to fit in. And because of that, you disrupt everything. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't seek sympathy, who doesn't join the chorus of complaints, who doesn't need external validation to feel secure. Your presence alone is a problem. Because when you refuse to participate in their emotional bargaining, their entire dynamic falls apart. And people hate when their system stops working. Society runs on unspoken rules, subtle manipulations, fake humility, expected guilt. Someone gives you a gift, you owe them. Someone shares their problems, you're supposed to mirror them with your own. Someone plays helpless, you're expected to rush in and save them. It's not always sinister, it's just how people function. They use guilt to get favors, flattery to win approval, emotional leverage to maintain control. They expect everyone to play along, to follow the script, to keep the illusion running smoothly. But you see through it. You recognize when people are fishing for sympathy. You notice when they use self-deprecation as a shield. You can tell when they're seeking validation instead of solutions. And worst of all, you don't fall for it. That makes you dangerous. Not because you're cruel, but because you won't be controlled. Most people aren't used to that. They're used to others responding on cue, offering reassurance, playing their part in the emotional economy. But you break the cycle. You don't feed their need for pity. You don't engage in guilt-based transactions. You don't offer cheap validation for the sake of social harmony. And that makes you an anomaly. Manipulators avoid you because their tactics don't work. They can't guilt trip you because you don't operate on guilt. They can't love bomb you because you don't crave approval. They can't bait you with drama because you see the trap before it's even set. People in power find you difficult because you ask questions they don't want to answer. You notice contradictions. You expose hypocrisy. You don't just listen to what they say. You analyze why they're saying it. And that's when the resentment starts. They don't like being seen. They don't like that their usual tricks fall flat. They don't like that their emotional leverage has no effect on you. So instead of changing their tactics, they make you the problem. They call you cold, distant, uncaring. They claim you lack empathy. They frame you as difficult, as arrogant, as someone who just doesn't get people. But here's the truth. They don't want you to get them. They want you to play along. They want you to lower yourself to their level. They want you to follow the same manipulative social scripts that keep everyone else trapped up, but you never will, because you don't bond through weakness. You don't trade in excuses. You don't pretend to be helpless just to make others feel comfortable. You were never meant to be controlled. You were meant to stand apart. And they hate that. They hate that you move through life without needing their approval. They hate that you see what they try to hide. They hate that their usual tricks don't work on you. But most of all, they hate that deep down, they wish they could be like you. So let them resent you. Let them misinterpret your silence. Let them label you as too much or too little. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, they will always need others to survive. And you were built to stand alone. Number 7, they can't fool you, so they fear you. A mind that sees the strings will never be a puppet. The game was rigged from the start, but they never expected you to figure it out. Most people don't even realize they're being manipulated. They walk through life on autopilot, responding to guilt, flattery, and pressure like well-trained dogs. They follow unspoken rules, obey invisible expectations, and mistake submission for social intelligence. But then you come along, and suddenly the game stops working. You don't respond to guilt-tripping. You don't fall for fake compliments. You don't dance to the rhythm they've set. You see the game for what it is, a carefully crafted illusion meant to keep you in line. And that makes you dangerous, because manipulation only works on people who don't recognize it. It feeds on blind trust, on emotional triggers, on predictable behavior. And when you refuse to react the way they want, you disrupt their control. You make them uneasy. You make them doubt their own tactics. You throw off the balance they've spent years perfecting. And that's why they fear you, because you can't be controlled. And nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone they can't manipulate. They've spent their entire lives perfecting the art of subtle coercion. They disguise control as kindness. They disguise guilt as concern. They disguise deception as diplomacy. They twist words, shift blame, and rewrite reality itself, all to make sure they get their way without ever looking like the villain. But you see through it. You recognize the forced smiles, the calculated phrasing, the strategic pauses designed to make you doubt yourself. You hear the manipulation behind their words, feel the control woven into their actions, and you don't fall for it. And that destroys them, because their power was never real. It only existed in the minds of those who believed in it. And the moment you refuse to play along, you strip them of that power. That's why they call you difficult, why they say you have trust issues, why they act like you're the problem. Because in their world, seeing the truth is the crime. And your crime? You refuse to be deceived. You refuse to flinch when they try to guilt you. You refuse to react when they bait you into an argument. You refuse to soften your boundaries for the sake of their comfort. They can't predict you. They can't control you. They can't manipulate you into submission. So what do? They turn everyone else against you. They plant seeds of doubt. They whisper that you're paranoid, difficult, untrusting. They frame your clarity as arrogance, your independence as selfishness. They spin the narrative to make you seem like the problem. Because if people start seeing what you see, the whole system falls apart. And that is their biggest fear. Because if one person wakes up, others might follow. And if enough people stop falling for their tricks, they lose everything. That's why they need you silenced, isolated, outnumbered. But here's what they don't understand. Once you see through the illusion, you can never unsee it. You will never fall back into blind obedience. You will never mistake manipulation for love. You will never trade your autonomy for acceptance. They lost their power over you the moment you woke up. And that is why they will never forgive you. Because deep down, they know if more people were like you, their entire way of life would collapse. So let them plot, let them whisper, let them try to twist the story in their favor. Because in the end, the truth always wins. And you were born to see it. Number 8. They want you to dim your light, so they don't have to squint. Excellence offends those who have accepted mediocrity as their ceiling. They call it relatability. They say you should be more approachable, more down to earth. But what they really mean is, make yourself smaller so they don't have to feel inadequate. Society loves to praise those who fit in, who blend seamlessly into the background, who never stand out too much, think too deeply, or rise too high. The moment you step outside that mold, you become a problem. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've done something they haven't. You've sharpened your mind while they let theirs rust. You've broken cycles while they've made excuses. You've faced truths they've spent their entire lives avoiding. And that makes them uncomfortable. Because if you exist as you are, sharp, focused, relentless, then what's their excuse? If success, depth and self-awareness are possible, then their lack of it isn't fate. It's a choice. And they can't have that. They can't face the fact that the only thing stopping them is themselves. So instead, they disguise their resentment as advice. You should be more relatable. You're too serious. Lighten up. Not everyone thinks like you. Maybe you should tone it down. Translation: make yourself more digestible so they don't have to choke on their own inadequacy. But here's the truth. Relatability is just another word for self-betrayal. They don't want you to be authentic. They want you to be accessible. They want you to strip away the very things that make you powerful. The sharpness of your thoughts, the intensity of your presence, the fire in your ambition, so they can feel safe in their stagnation. And the moment you refuse, you become the villain. They'll call you arrogant, distant, elitist. Not because you are, but because it's easier to attack you than admit they should be better. They don't want to see that they could have sharpened their minds, expanded their horizons, or elevated their lives. They don't want to accept that they chose comfort over growth. That's too painful. So they spin the story. It's not that I'm not trying, it's that they think they're better than me. It's the classic defense mechanism of the mediocre. If they can't rise to meet you, they'll try to pull you down to their level. But here's what they don't realize. You weren't built to be relatable. You weren't meant to fit in. You weren't designed to shrink yourself for their comfort. You were chosen to stand apart, to lead, to elevate. And the truth is, relatability has never changed the world. Geniuses weren't relatable. Visionaries weren't relatable. The greatest minds in history weren't spending their time trying to make others comfortable. They were too busy pushing forward, breaking barriers, rewriting reality. So why should you be any different? Why should you make yourself small just to be accepted by those who will never understand you anyway? Why should you pretend to be less than you are just so they don't have to feel like failures? The answer is simple. You shouldn't. Your job isn't to be understood. Your job isn't to be liked. Your job is to become so unapologetically yourself that their opinions become irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, what they think of you doesn't change reality. It doesn't dim your intelligence, erase your achievements, or lower your frequency. All it does is expose them. Expose their fears. Expose their insecurities. Expose the smallness of their thinking. And that's why they need you to be relatable. Because the moment you stop playing small, they have to face the uncomfortable truth. They were always capable of more. They just chose not to be. So let them talk. Let them twist your confidence into arrogance. Let them whisper that you're too much. It doesn't matter. Because the truth is, the only people who need you to be relatable are the ones who refuse to rise. Number 9. They don't want truth. They want a mirror that lies. A comfortable lie will always be more popular than an uncomfortable truth, but only fools choose comfort over clarity. They don't seek truth, they seek confirmation. They don't want to think, they want to feel right. And when you refuse to give them that, you become a problem. Most people don't hold beliefs because they've thought them through. They hold them because they were given to them, fed to them, reinforced by the people around them, and repeated until they felt like facts. The moment you challenge that, the moment you force them to think for themselves, you disrupt their entire reality. And that makes you dangerous. Because you don't just disagree, you make them confront the possibility that they've been wrong, and nothing terrifies the weak-minded more than realizing they've spent years, sometimes their entire lives, building an identity on a foundation of sand. See, they expect conversations to be a game of mutual validation. They expect you to nod along, to agree even when you don't, to stroke their ego and let them believe their half-baked opinions are deep wisdom. They want to be told they're right, not tested to see if they actually are. But then you come along, asking questions that demand real answers, answers they don't have. You don't argue to win, you argue to reveal. You force them to defend their claims, to support their ideas with logic, to think instead of regurgitate. And that's when they start to panic, because deep down, they know if their beliefs were solid, they wouldn't feel threatened. If their opinions were strong, they wouldn't need validation. But they do, and that's why your presence unsettles them. It's why they call you difficult when you won't just agree. It's why they say you're too serious when you ask for clarity. It's why they claim you always have to be right when all you did was refuse to lie to make them comfortable. The truth is, they don't resent you for challenging them. They resent you for making them realize they've never challenged themselves. And so, instead of rising to your level, they try to pull you down to theirs. They dismiss you as argumentative. They label you cold. They throw around words like know-it-all, as if intelligence is an insult. Because if they can paint you as the villain, they never have to question whether they're the fool. But let's be clear about one thing. You don't challenge people to be cruel. You challenge them because you refuse to live in a world built on lies. You challenge them because you know that growth doesn't come from comfort. That wisdom isn't handed out for free. That the mind, like a blade, only sharpens under pressure. And for those who have the strength to meet you there, that's a gift. But for the weak, For the ones who have built their entire existence around never being questioned, you are their worst nightmare. Because you don't hand out participation trophies. You don't pretend bad ideas are good just to keep the peace. You don't reward laziness with approval. And in a world that runs on validation over truth, that makes you an anomaly. But here's where they miscalculated. You don't need their validation. They spent their entire lives chasing approval, shaping themselves into whatever form gets them accepted, while you carved yourself into what's real. And that's why, no matter how much they resent you, they'll never be able to ignore you. Because deep down, they know you see through them, you hear their words, but you listen for the truth. And more often than not, you find nothing. So let them squirm, let them resist, let them call you names, roll their eyes, dismiss you as too much. It doesn't matter. Because in the end, when the dust settles, they'll realize something that haunts them more than any argument you've ever won. You never needed their approval, but they always needed yours. Number 10. They wasted their years, and now they hate you for proving it. The worst pain isn't losing time, it's realizing someone else used theirs better. You walk into a room and the energy shifts. Not because you said anything, not because you did anything, just because you exist. And that alone is enough to make them uncomfortable. They've spent years, decades even, convincing themselves that life is about drifting, that it's okay to settle, that growth is optional. They believed they could stay the same, keep the same thoughts, cling to the same outdated perspectives, and somehow they'd still be enough. And then you show up, and without even trying, you destroy that illusion. You are living proof that time isn't the issue, effort is. That the years they wasted weren't stolen from them by bad luck, by circumstances, by fate, but by their own choices. And that fact, it eats them alive. Because if you could evolve, if you could sharpen your mind, push your limits, break past the excuses, then what's their excuse? They look at you, and they don't just see you, they see the person they could have been, if only they had tried. And that's what makes them resent you. They'll never say it outright. No, they're too cowardly for that. Instead, they'll find ways to discredit you. You think too much. You take life too seriously. You act like you're better than everyone. But what they really mean is, I can't stand the reminder that I wasted my potential. Because deep down, they know the truth. The years they spent scrolling mindlessly, gossiping about things that didn't matter, numbing themselves with distractions, it all adds up. And now, they have nothing to show for it. Meanwhile, you sharpened your mind, you questioned everything, you grew while they stood still, and that stings. Because people can accept failure, they can accept setbacks, they can even accept being average. But what they cannot accept, what they will never forgive, is being forced to see the proof that they could have done more. And that's exactly what you are, walking proof. It's not your intelligence that offends them. It's not your insights, your wisdom, or your ability to cut through the nonsense and see reality for what it is. It's the fact that you expose them. Every time you speak, every time you move, every time you exist in a space they occupy, they feel it. The weight of the time they let slip through their fingers. The haunting realization that they weren't victims of circumstance. They were complicit in their own stagnation. So what do? Do they rise to the challenge? Do they take inspiration from you and finally start becoming what they should have been? No, that would take effort. That would take accountability. And effort is exhausting, and accountability is painful. So instead, They choose the easy way out. They resent you. They mock you. They label you. Not because you deserve it, but because it's easier to attack you than admit the truth. Because to admit the truth would mean facing something far more terrifying than you, their own wasted years. And here's the thing, it will never stop. The older you get, the worse it will become, because the gap will only widen. While they continue recycling the same old thoughts, you'll keep evolving. While they waste more time, you'll make the most of yours. And before long, the resentment will turn into something deeper, regret. And regret is lethal. It's why they desperately try to tear you down now, while they still have the chance. They think if they can just convince you to slow down, if they can just make you doubt yourself, then maybe, just maybe, they won't have to face the truth of what they've become. But here's the problem. You see through them. You see what they don't say. You see the regret hiding behind their sarcasm. You see the envy buried under their forced laughter. You see the pain disguised as indifference. And that's why they'll never like you. Because as long as you exist, they can't escape the truth. So let them resent you. Let them talk. Let them pretend they don't care. Because the truth is, the longer you keep winning, the harder it gets for them to lie to themselves. Number 11. They don't want truth. They want an echo of their own voices. Weak minds seek agreement. Strong minds seek truth. They don't hate you because you're wrong. They hate you because you won't clap along with their delusions. Because you ask questions they can't answer. Because you refuse to nod in blind agreement when you know they're spewing nonsense. Most people don't want to think. They want to feel right. They want the comfort of knowing that everyone around them thinks the same, believes the same, agrees on everything without question. They don't want to debate. They don't want to challenge their own perspectives. And they sure as hell don't want someone like you walking in and disrupting the illusion. Because that's what you are to them, a disruption. You introduce ideas that force them to think, and that's unforgivable. When you speak, you break the harmony of their echo chamber. You bring friction into a space that was built to be frictionless. And in their minds, that makes you dangerous. Because an echo chamber isn't just a comfort zone, it's a prison built out of agreement, and every time you challenge it, you're shaking the walls. You've seen it happen. You ask a question that isn't supposed to be asked. You point out a flaw in their logic. You introduce a new perspective when all they wanted was the same one repeated back to them, and suddenly the mood shifts. The air gets thick. The smiles get tight. You can feel their discomfort. They try to steer the conversation back into safe, shallow waters. They laugh nervously, brush you off, act like you're overthinking or taking things too seriously. And when that doesn't work, they turn on you. You're arrogant, you're contrarian, you're too much. Not because you are, but because you don't belong in their echo chamber. They never wanted truth. They never wanted depth. They wanted confirmation. That's why they surround themselves with people who think like them, speak like them, believe exactly what they believe. They want an audience, not a conversation, an applause track, not a dialogue. And you refuse to play along. You don't swallow empty narratives. You don't repeat opinions just to fit in. You don't reduce yourself to a parrot when you were built to be a thinker. And that makes you public enemy number one, because you force them to confront the one thing they never wanted to face. What if they're wrong? What if the beliefs they've built their identity on are flawed? What if the truths they hold on to so tightly are just convenient lies? What if the real reason they avoid you isn't because you're too opinionated or too intense, but because they can't defend their own beliefs once you start asking the right questions. That's why they need you gone. They'll ice you out, they'll silence you, they'll twist your words, mock your perspective, and do everything in their power to make you seem wrong, even when they know you're right. Because to them, you aren't a person, you're a threat to their illusion. And here's the cruel irony. If they had any real strength, they'd thank you. They'd see you as an opportunity to grow, to evolve, to refine their own thinking. They'd embrace the friction, because friction sharpens the blade. But they aren't looking to be sharper. They're looking to be comfortable. And you make them uncomfortable as hell. So let them exile you. Let them whisper behind your back. Let them throw labels at you to make themselves feel safe. Because history remembers disruptors. It forgets the chorus of yes men, the obedient sheep, the comfortable masses who never questioned anything. But the ones who dared to challenge, the ones who refused to echo back the same tired ideas, they leave a mark. So keep speaking, keep questioning, keep disrupting, because in the end, truth doesn't need an echo. It only needs a voice. Number 12. They were built for shallow waters. You were born for the depths. The deep intimidates those who have only ever known the shore. They call it good social skills. What they really mean is, they've mastered the art of sounding like they know something when they actually don't. Watch them. They move effortlessly through surface-level conversations, exchanging empty words like currency. They know exactly when to laugh, when to nod, when to sprinkle in just enough fake depth to sound interesting without ever saying anything real. Their entire social identity is built on pretend engagement. They don't need to think, they just need to perform, and they've been rewarded for it their whole lives. But then you walk in, and suddenly the script doesn't work anymore. You're not interested in shallow waters. You don't just talk to pass time. You listen, you question, you push the conversation further, and that's when the cracks start to show. Because the truth is, most people don't think when they speak. They repeat. They recycle opinions, regurgitate headlines, and piece together their worldview from whatever was easiest to absorb. The moment you disrupt that, by asking the wrong question, by challenging an assumption, by refusing to play along, they freeze. Because they weren't prepared for this. They were built for predictable interactions, and you are anything but predictable. You see it happen in real time. The shift, the tension, the way their body language changes when they realize they can't just coast through this conversation like they usually do. They start fumbling for words. They default to defensiveness. They look for an escape, checking their phone, changing the subject, laughing awkwardly to fill the silence. And when none of that works, they turn on you. They'll say you're too intense, that you overcomplicate things, that you make conversations feel like an interrogation. But what they really mean is, you're exposing how shallow they are. They'll tell you to lighten up, to just go with the flow, to stop taking everything so seriously. But what they actually want is for you to shrink, to dull yourself down so they don't have to rise to meet you. Because let's be real, they're not struggling because they lack intelligence. They're struggling because they've never had to use it in social settings. They've been conditioned to think that good communication means being agreeable, charming, and non-threatening. That it means sticking to topics that don't demand too much from anyone. That it means never making people uncomfortable. But here's the thing. Growth is uncomfortable, and you don't fear discomfort. That's why they don't know what to do with you. They can navigate office gossip, celebrity scandals, and the latest TV shows with ease. But ask them something real, something that requires them to think, to engage beyond the surface, and they fall apart. Their charm fades, their confidence crumbles, and what's left is the terrifying realization that they were never actually good at socializing. They were just good at faking it. And that makes them resent you, because deep down they know you see through it. You see the cracks in their facade. You see how much of their identity is built on illusion. And instead of rising to the challenge of learning how to communicate beyond their usual scripts, they label you as the problem. But you're not the problem. You were just never meant for shallow waters. You were built for conversations that move something, that challenge, that reveal, that force people to confront truths they'd rather ignore. And the reality is, they won't all be able to handle that. Some will avoid you, some will lash out, some will dismiss you as difficult, arrogant, or socially awkward. Let them. Because the ones who can't keep up were never meant to walk this path with you anyway. And the ones who can, the ones who crave depth, who see what you see, who think the way you think, they'll recognize you instantly. And when they do, you'll realize something powerful. You were never alone. You were just surrounded by the wrong people. And that's the truth they can't escape. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to stand out and rise. If you feel this, if you know this, hit like, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments. Share this message. Let more chosen ones wake up.